Good morning, everyone. Let's get right into the intelligence briefing for March 14th, 2026. Here's our roadmap for today. We're starting with the lead story on how India is handling the West Asia conflict. Then we'll jump into key macro and political updates, followed by what's happening in the corporate world. We'll wrap things up with a look at the editorials and the final market numbers. Okay, let's begin. So for our lead story, the conflict in West Asia is no longer a distant problem. It's now being treated as a direct macroeconomic risk here in India, and we're seeing the government start to build a real buffer against these growing global headwinds. And how are they doing that? Well, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman just announced that the center is setting aside 57,381 crore rupees for a brand new economic stabilization fund. The idea here is pretty simple: create a financial cushion. This gives the government room to handle sudden shocks, like a surge in oil prices or major supply chain problems, without completely derailing the national budget. But, while the government is planning its fiscal response, the financial markets, well, they've already reacted. And it has been swift and severe. In fact, Indian equities just had their worst week in almost 6 years. Let's break down the hard data, because it really tells the story. Both the Sensex and the Nifty fell over 5% this week. That's a huge drop. The VIX, which is basically our fear index, shot up to 22.66, a clear sign of investor anxiety. The rupee also hit a new low of 92.3 against the dollar. And maybe the biggest tell? Foreign investors have more than doubled their bets that the market is going to keep falling. It's a classic defensive move. And this isn't just about numbers on a screen anymore. The pressure is moving from the financial world right onto the streets, affecting everyday life and public services. So what does that actually look like? Well, we're seeing tighter security and long lines at LPG agencies. The number of daily refill requests has jumped from about 5.5 million to over 7.5 million. And even though officials are saying domestic supplies are fine, this whole situation really shines a light on a massive strategic vulnerability. Get this, 90% of our LPG imports come through the Strait of Hormuz, which is right in the middle of the conflict zone. All right, let's shift gears and look at the bigger national picture. In macro, politics, and governance, we've got 5 key updates for you. First up, that energy anxiety we just talked about, it is now spilling over into households in a big way. In Delhi, we've seen panic buying and long queues at petrol pumps. It's gotten so serious that police have had to cancel leave and step up security at gas agencies to stop black marketing. Officials keep saying supplies are normal, but the public's reaction is telling a very different story. Next, let's turn to the legislative front. The Maharashtra government has just introduced a new bill called the Freedom of Religion Bill 2026. The government says it's meant to protect religious freedom by putting heavy penalties on conversions that happen through force, fraud, or even marriage. And when you look closer at what's in this bill, it's pretty strict. It's proposing up to 10 years in prison and a fine of 7 lakh rupees. It also really broadens the definition of what counts as allurement, and it gives courts the power to void marriages that are found to be for the purpose of an unlawful conversion. This law puts Maharashtra in the same category as states like Uttar Pradesh and Gujarat, which have very similar legislation. Now, over in Uttar Pradesh, we're seeing a really interesting political move from Rahul Gandhi. Right before Kanshi Ram's birth anniversary, he came out and acknowledged that the Congress Party has failed marginalized communities in the past. And this is a big deal because Dalits make up 21% of the state's electorate. So this is a very clear, very early attempt to win over a crucial voting bloc before next year's assembly election. Meanwhile, in West Bengal, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee just announced that 5 new community boards are being created. This happened just a few days after President Draupadi Murmu publicly pointed out that the state wasn't taking scheduled tribe development seriously enough. The government says these boards are for cultural preservation, but the opposition is already raising questions about their funding and how effective they'll actually be. And our final update in this section is from Bihar. It looks like Chief Minister Nitish Kumar has publicly hinted that Deputy CM Samrat Chaudhary could be his successor. Now, nothing is official, but a public gesture like this, it really puts the state's long-running succession question front and center. Okay, let's turn to the corporate world. We're tracking some important developments in deal-making, leadership changes, and what's happening on the factory floor. First up, you might remember that Jindal Steel International made a surprise bid for ThyssenKrupp's steel business about 6 months ago. Well, that deal has hit a wall. The talks have gone past the exciting headline phase and are now bogged down in some very fundamental economic issues.
So what's the holdup? Well, it boils down to three big things. First, who's going to pay for the massive legacy pension liabilities? Second, what's the cost going to be for any potential job cuts? And third, how much support will the German government provide to help the plant go green? These are really complex problems tied to labor, money, and the future of green steel.
Now for some huge news in the tech world. A major era is ending at Adobe. Shantanu Narayan is stepping down as CEO after more than 18 years in the top job. He's not leaving entirely, though. He'll stay on as chair and acting CEO until they find his replacement. And this timeline, wow, it really puts his impact into perspective. When he took over, Adobe's annual revenue was just over $3.5 billion. Last year, it was nearly $24 billion. His time as CEO will absolutely be defined by that crucial and incredibly successful pivot from selling desktop software to a cloud-based subscription model. And just a couple of quick sector updates for you. In consumer goods, premium personal care is becoming a real engine of growth for companies like Marico and Hindustan Unilever. It's helping their profit margins at a time when mass market demand is a bit shaky. And that industrial energy stress we talked about earlier, it's hitting companies directly now. Jindal Stainless is reporting that gas shortages are actually limiting their plant's output.
Okay, so how are the opinion pages making sense of all this? Two arguments really stood out to us today. The first editorial, called Duty of Care, argues that a recent Supreme Court ruling on COVID vaccine compensation is a game changer for public health accountability. The main point is right here in this quote. The state can't just push for mass health programs for the public good and then wash its hands of the consequences when something goes wrong. It has a duty to provide a real path to compensation.
And second, Shashi Tharoor is writing about the end of the Washington Consensus. That's the old economic playbook that favored deregulation and privatization. He argues that that formula is just plain obsolete in the world we live in now. Instead, he says we need a new global agreement that actually embraces industrial policy and is built to handle modern risks like climate change, digital trade, and AI. And finally, let's close out with the verified market numbers. The Sensex ended the day at 74,563. The Nifty 50 is at 23,151. The rupee is trading at 92.45 to the US dollar. Brent crude is at $98.41 a barrel, and the India VX, that volatility measure, closed at 22.66. That concludes today's intelligence briefing. Thanks for joining us.